Hey, Lynn, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks very much for having me.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad we're able to work this out. You're in Australia today, and I always do the same joke every time. I said, technically you're already ahead of time in the next day, so I always say if anything happens, in my tomorrow, I hope you let me know.
I'll let you know. I
Good deal.
will.
Well, welcome to the Ozark Mountain Publishing author series, and today I would like to talk to you about your several books you have written and published with Ozark Mountain Publishing. One of them is Small Book of Comfort, and then there's a trilogy of Beyond All Boundaries. So, please, if you don't mind, starting out with a little bit of background information about yourself before we get into the books.
Okay. Um, I'm, as you say, I'm an Australian. I'm actually a potter. I did my degree at university in ceramic design. So, and then I opened my own pottery, and so I was a potter for quite a few years. And but slowly my hands started to become arthritic, and I found it very hard to work with the clay. And so, and I've always been interested in writing, and I was actually a teacher as well. So, and I was teaching English, so I automatically sort of drifted into writing, and I have got quite a bit to say. So, so I started writing the books that we're going to talk about. The three books, they just came about out of the blue. I just did not know what was happening. When I started to write about, I thought I was writing about a fairy story for children. I wanted to talk about climate change, and I was going to put it into this sort of little story for children. But as I started to write, something odd began to happen. It was almost out of my control, and I found myself getting lost in a story about a kingdom, an alien kingdom, hidden in the remote areas of northern Australia. So that's how the trilogy started, almost as if I was made. I had to write it. It was very strange. So there we go. That's how. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about the book, or?
Yeah, please,
Um,
however you feel comfortable moving forward. Because so basically, was it all based on climate change, or did it develop into something else?
Oh no, it developed. No, the original need. I wanted to talk about climate change, but as I started to write this book, it developed into a whole lot of. Well, it was an adventure mainly, but I was able to sort of drop little hints here and there about different things that I thought were really important for people to know. But I hid that behind these adventures. So the trilogy is aimed at, I suppose, teenagers, but I know adults can read it too, read the books as well. So, it's much older, an older audience than I originally thought. I was doing a fairy story for little children. It became a much older book. Um, so the story is set in remote area of northern Australia, and it is quite remote up there, and very hot. And so the adventures, or the storyline, goes along the lines of a human boy who gets lost in this remote area and accidentally discovers an alien kingdom. So I actually feel very strongly that we do have what I call visitors. We do have aliens here, and we've had aliens on this planet for a long time. And so I've sort of included this in my book. So this human boy, discovers an alien kingdom, and I wrote that. I started that book right back 2004, 2005, and then I rewrote it in 2015 because by this time I was thinking of a sequel. So I rewrote the first book so it fitted into the story of the second book. And in this second book, there's a close friendship develops between the leader of this alien kingdom and a group of humans. And so in this book, they're protecting an old professor who's developing a powder which has interdimensional properties. And they know the Australian government wants the powder, and the Australian government was also demanding the whole project be kept secret. So this is the adventure of this young group of adults. That was the basis of my second book. And as I say, behind these adventures is a narrative that does concern climate change and what's happening to our society, and also the reality of aliens, or what I call visitors here on the planet, and sort of discoveries of how quantum physics is so important, and also the control of multinationals over the various governments of the world. So, but that was all hidden behind this sort of page-turning adventure. So that was the second book. And then when Ozark actually agreed to publish these books, I then wrote the third book. So the third book was written not so long ago. When I knew that they were going to publish my books, I thought, well, we'll have a trilogy. But by this time, when the third book was written, I realized that climate change was here, and no leader or government, or no official had really enough power to protect us, that we are actually going to have to face this. So in my book, in this third book, my heroes turn away from the crisis facing the world and begin to search for alternative solutions to their lifestyle. And they discover a huge cave system hidden in the remote areas of northern Australia. And in there they discover an underground city, people by very wise telepathic interdimensional humans who help them come to terms with the changes that are occurring to their lives. So that's the third book. So that's the trilogy that I've written.
So, Lynn, was this then just as it came to you, you then just kept putting it down on paper and writing it out? Or
Absolutely. Yes.
So there was nothing that you
can
could specifically say, oh, I maybe had contact or maybe had connection with something higher that kind of fed this information to me. It was just as it came to you, you just simply written it down.
Yes, I simply wrote it down. It's very strange how. I'll tell you another incident that happened to me just not so long after I wrote the second book. In the second book, I do have a wise person I call the Oracle, a person that just appears through the dimensions and gives leadership and advice to the group. So that he came up out of nowhere when I was writing. He just appeared. He just appeared. But after I finished the book, I had to have my cataracts removed from my eyes, and it was quite one of the eyes was quite painful. And after I came home from the operation, I was lying on my bed in the dark, feeling miserable, and I do have the ability to visualize things, and I drifted into this visualization where suddenly this oracle out of the book was suddenly in my mind, telling me or ordering me to. He was in the cave, just as I described in my book. He was sitting by a fire in the cave, and across against the cave wall was a ladder, and the oracle told me to climb up the ladder. So visually, I'm still lying on my bed, but visually I'm climbing up a ladder, and I poked my head through the top of the cave, and I was blasted with this brilliant light, absolutely blinding light. And as that happened, I was overwhelmed with the most amazing feelings of love and good feelings and wonder, and it was just extraordinary. And so that happened. So that was connected to the book in some strange way, and I started after that to think about what we authors do. We create these characters, and in our minds they become quite real. And so I've written 3 books that I've got friends, people I know that are in these books. I know it sounds very strange, and I have no idea how it occurs, but anyway, that was something that was quite strange that happened to me, and quite beautiful, and actually made huge changes to me, that experience when I was blasted with the light.
And so, Lynn, I guess, can you then, based on these stories that you've written, can you sort of extrapolate then them basic concepts that you then are wanting to convey by telling these stories?
Yes,
Because I'm assuming there are several,
well,
and if you could
yeah,
just maybe cover a few, just so that we get an idea what else it entails.
right. Let me. I'm just trying to organize myself.
Sure.
Well, I believe in UFOs, and I believe. And this one I can help with. This one, I believe that visitors are here and have been here for a long while. People or entities coming from other worlds, and sort of as a proof of that. My uncle was an Australian pilot flying bombers out of England during the Second World War. And when he came home, he would tell us about these lights that flew around their planes, and they called these lights the Foo Fighters. They had no idea what the lights were. And apparently the same thing was happening on the other side with German pilots. We, I think, have to assume that these miraculous alien beings have been here for at least 80 years. They probably were trying to work out what the hell we were doing, fighting each other, killing each other. But anyway, my uncle was actually experienced Foo Fighters. So in a way, I was very young when he told me that. So in a way, that gave me, I suppose, a basis for my belief in UFOs. And also, apparently, now you would know that your Congress is starting to actually listen to people who have documented all these various contacts with UFOs, and so there's apparently changes taking place in Washington. Um, um, they're wanting to call UFOs UAPs now for some reason, but it's becoming quite public, and the U.S. Congress are demanding answers from your, I think, Navy. Your Navy has a lot of information about UFOs. So anyway, that's one of my beliefs. I don't feel that they're dangerous, and I don't think they'll interfere with what we're doing unless we try and kill ourselves with atomic warfare. I think maybe they'll interfere then, but they're here. I think they're here to help us if we can listen or be aware enough.
But yeah, just in addition, yeah, you're right. They have I think they call it the UAP department now, it's where they collect more data, and they'll had several congressional hearings. So technically, I mean, I don't know what else people are expecting. To me, that's a disclosure. I mean, if you think that this is just swamp gas, then they've gone miles beyond that. So I don't know how much more disclosure they need, but I don't know, just a personal belief of mine. I think because it's been so long, people are just now waiting now for the next shoe to drop. They're like, okay, these lights in the sky have been around, but are they alien? I think that's what now. That's why there hasn't been such a big fuss from the public, because I was like, this is exactly what all the other UFO researchers would have died for, to finally have Congress, admit, and there's basically crickets on the public side.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think eventually it's becoming public knowledge now, and people are almost able. It's not frightening that people are able to accept it. Although I must say, over here in Australia, we're not nearly as public. Public awareness is nothing like it is in America.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, there's UFOs over here as well. But we just don't talk about it over here. We're very, very sort of staid and backward. And I find myself, I can't talk about these things with my friends and my family here, because they just don't. They're just not aware of it. And if I open my mouth and try and say something, they just turn away, saying, "Oh, here goes Lynn again." So I don't say anything anymore.
Right. I'm sorry to hear that. I know for here in the United States, it's changed so much to where a lot of them have warmed up to it. It's actually quite becoming the other way around, to where it's rare that the person is not interested. They usually kind of stop and go like, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. Tell me more." So it has changed quite a bit.
Gosh.
Even as 5 years ago, it would have still been in the same shoe. But then again, I have to kind of be careful saying that. Maybe it's just a crowd that I kind of happen to be around, that it's always in that way, because somehow with me, at the end of the night, the conversation always turns alien, so everyone knows.
It really?
Yeah, they know. It's like, okay, we had our party, now it's time for the woo-woo stuff.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. I wish I had a group that I could talk to, because it's very frustrating having all these beliefs and all these ideas, and not being able to share them or talk about them or develop the ideas. So everyone has a slightly different view, and when you all get together talking, I mean, it's quite exciting, isn't it?
No,
I
certainly.
envy
But
you.
by having these books written in the form of a story, they don't even have to believe, but at least it would leave a little seed in their mind, to ponder about. So it's a very clever way too that you've done it that way.
Yes, well, hopefully more people will enjoy the book. I have written them as adventure, as interesting page-turning stories. But the central premise, or my central hero, is an alien woman. And her name is Chaldi, and she is the leader of the alien, a small kingdom. They've been so remote for so long that their kingdom is beginning to disintegrate. They've been tucked away for too long. So one of the premise in my book is that this Chaldi knows that she has to bring her people in to be accepted by the humans because they're not surviving on their own. So that's one of the premises, that they need us as well as we need them.
And so is it also then with that connection, that basically needing to connect to the humans that are already here, is it basically then the next story about telling about making the humans more aware about what's going on the planet, or is there other more premise points to be made?
There's there's more to be understood. I'm writing this from an Australian point of view, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so I'm writing this thinking that more and more has to be understood by the people. So I'm hoping my book will alert people over here to the fact that we are being visited. But for the American public, they'll probably enjoy the book because they do believe in aliens, and they'll accept my book as much more, with much more surrounded by reality.
Right.
So, yes.
Well, I was just going to say, so then it has aspect of alien visitors. It has aspect of climate change. What other things does it touch on that could be a message to us?
Yes. Other things that I'm aware of or concerned about. Is I'm just trying to get my head around. It's very hard for me to talk about these things because it's something I just don't talk about. I believe in near-death experiences, so that I believe that we don't die. We just leave our body behind, and we move into another reality or another dimension. This is why I think quantum physics is so important, because quantum physics has shown us that there are many, many realities, and consciousness needs to be understood. That these realities within consciousness, it's very complex, but quantum physics has opened a door to many new realities. So I believe that we don't die. Recently, I listened to a person who had a near-death experience, and while he was on the other side, he learned that at a collective level, collective consciousness level, humanity has agreed to bring about a change. So I'm very aware that there is some massive change of consciousness or massive change of awareness happening in our society. And once again, the fact that you're able to sit and talk to your friends about UFOs you couldn't have done that 10 years ago, could you?
Well, with
These changes.
close friends, not with just, let's say, a random person at a party, which by now it has changed. But no, 10 years ago,
Yes,
no.
10 years ago, I couldn't be having this conversation with you 10 years ago. So, and there's so many changes taking place, and so people are becoming so much more aware of not only climate change and the world around them, but the world within them, inside themselves. That some of the changes, of course, are really, really frightening. Climate change and the war in the war that Russia is causing. I mean, these are terrible changes as well. But the individual change within human beings is what I'm talking about, really. The rigid belief systems that we used to have, especially around religion, that's being opened up. People are much wiser than they used to be even 20 years ago. Because of my age, because I'm in my 80s, you can imagine what it was like when I was a child to what my grandchildren are experiencing. It's just a different world, just a different world altogether.
Right.
So huge changes taking place. And I tried to put that into my book as much as, I couldn't put these things in. They would bore people. I just tried to have to drop little hints here and there. Of course, the other thing that's very interesting is the archaeological digs that they're finding now. For instance, they were saying that the pyramids were the oldest sites in the world, and the pyramids go back to about 5,000 years BC. Well, now they've found sites in Syria that date back to 11 and 12,000 BC. So once again, if we look backwards as well as forwards, we find that there were civilizations that were very advanced, around the time of the flood, the Great Flood, where the part of the northern hemisphere, all the ice melted and gave us that flood. That was around 12,000 years ago, and that seems to have wiped out another civilization. So there's all these interesting things that I just tried to drop little hints in my books. So
Right.
there's some of the things that I believe in and follow.
Well,
The fact that
it sounds like,
humanity is much,
right.
much older than we think.
But it sounds like, I think that the trilogy, it's a good, combination of the different subjects told in a story that basically would be, good enough for anybody to read, whether you're into this or not, whether you're religious or not, and whether it changes you, that's a different story. But at least it's not. Because some people, especially that most of the time that I interviewed, they've written from experience point of view, meaning they're convinced they had contact with aliens. They had convinced that they passed on and came back, and had a near death experience, and so those stories for the more, I guess, people are not quite awake yet. I don't know how else to say this. I don't mean that in an insulting way.
Yes,
Just,
it's hard.
that would
Yes,
be
it's
difficult.
hard to
But if
say.
you're just telling a story, so it kind of puts them at ease. They're like, oh, I can believe this or I don't. It's not going to push any boundaries
Exactly.
that they might
Mm.
have.
Yeah. Of course, I've hidden this so well that a lot of people wouldn't even know what I'm saying.
Mm,
If they don't have those beliefs, they would just read through this and not even know what they're reading. So it's not as if I'm hitting people over the head with something. It's just hinted here and there. And if people grasp what is being said, well, that just adds to their enjoyment. But the three books really are just an adventure. They're
right.
just so in a way we're opening up. Trying to open up Australia to the rest of the world, because I'm one of the things I did in my youth was I hitched round Australia. That was in the 60s.
Mhm.
Imagine that. Anyway, in the 60s, I hitched around Australia. So, and back then, the north of Australia we didn't even have bitumen roads back then. It was all dirt roads, etc. It's a bit different now, but it's still a very strange and remote country, Australia, when you get into the outback.
Right. Well, I think
And
especially for where you live and basically reflecting and saying how the environment is regarding these different subjects. I think it's perfect, and couldn't have done it better to just write it in that way. I think we already covered that, but I'm just reiterating again that I think it's best where you live for the type of subjects. I think this would be the only way really that they can kind of get to someone who's
mm,
just so blocked off from everything else.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, Lynn, so
Yes.
is
Well,
there anything else you would like to
yes.
cover regarding the books?
Sorry,
I was saying, is there
I
anything else
missed
you would
what you
like to?
said then.
I was asking if there's
I,
anything else you would like to cover regarding the books.
oh, no, not really.
Okay.
I think uh, from what I'm saying, do you now understand what you've got an idea, haven't you? So the listeners would also have an idea of what I'm
Right.
talking about, I should imagine. I
Yeah,
hope.
certainly.
I
Certainly.
haven't really got anything more to say about them, except I must say here that our first Australians, the Indigenous people, and I mention this many times in the book, our people have been inhabiting Australia from, they go back at least 60,000 years, probably longer.
Mhm.
Now that's huge. Isn't that in relationship to civilizations in the northern hemisphere? 60,000 years for one race of people is quite amazing, isn't it? And so they've lived in Australia, looked after the land for 60,000 years. And then a white man came along, and well, you should see what we've done to some of the land. But so in my book, I recognise the amazing how the Australian Aborigines have contributed to Australia as a landmass. So yes, there's that as well.
Well, Lynn, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Of course, I'm going to make sure that all the links to all your books and whatever the contact information you have is in the description below. And I'm glad we're able to connect and talk about these books today.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy to have done it, and thank you very much for having me.
Definitely. Well, Lynn, I hope we can do this again sometime, and you take care for now.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.